So we just got finished talking about the social exchange ideas regarding attraction and who you love. Now, one thing I do want to say is that there are two other theories, but they don't really contradict love as you would think about it. So I think the greatest contribution that the social exchange theory offers is this high effort cognitive processing that can be useful to predict relationship satisfaction, like do you break up or not. So I think that's its main contribution, but it does have weaknesses. For example, um, it doesn't explicitly state what factors or what weights people will use because everyone's different, and so because of that, prediction's really hard with that thing. Outside of relationship satisfaction, it's really hard to predict. Will you love your partner or not? I mean, it predicts like, yeah, I'll stay with you, but it doesn't predict anything above and beyond that. And that's where the next two theories kind of come in, is they predict who you do and do not love per se. I don't know. I'm going to preface that statement, but let's just get to it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So the first theory is really going to predict not so much love per se, but it's going to predict who you want to have sex with. And here, when I say sex, I explicitly mean sex. All right. No, sorry. There you go. It's evolutionary theory. All right. And evolutionary theory, it's a whole field of psychology. It's basically rooted in the idea that when we were, like cave people, we developed a set of traits and habits that, if successful, are retained, and if they're not successful, they are deleted. It's like the classic Darwin kind of idea, like survival of the fittest kind of idea. And as it relates to attraction, the overall goal for everybody is to pass on their genes. And so this theory is surprisingly good at figuring out what women want and what men want as it relates to who you're going to have sex with. All right. So let's be clear on this. I just read the word idea. Let's be clear on this. What's happening is that our goal for evolutionary theory is to pass on our genes to the next generation. In other words, we need to produce offspring, and that offspring needs to be able to produce offspring, and their offspring needs to be able to produce offspring, and so on and so forth. Now, that's where biological fitness comes into play. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're biologically fit, which means that you are in the best possible psychological and physical condition to father or mother a child, and that your offspring will also be in peak physical form and psychological form to produce their own offspring as well, and so on and so forth. So, for example, according to this theory, a person should not have sex with anyone who has a physical deformity or has some sort of mental or psychological deficit. For example, you wouldn't want to have, according to this theory, you wouldn't want to have sex with someone with Down syndrome because the likelihood of them passing that Down syndrome gene on is high. And what's going to happen is if the child has Down syndrome, they're not going to be likely to pass on their genes. And so what you want is someone who's fit, biologically fit. All right. So let's go through what the men and the women want. So men, what their goal is according to this theory, is to pass on their genes as much as possible. So what they're motivated to do is father as many children as they can. All right. So what this means is that you want to have sex often with multiple partners. What we know about pregnancy is that women only get pregnant while they're ovulating, which is a very small window of time each month. And the way it works is guys in particular, especially cavemen guys, think of it like that, don't have any idea of when ovulation is occurring. And so what's going to have to happen is that as a guy, let's say I was a guy in this time, what I would want to do is I would want to have sex with a different person each night. That way, I can kind of up my odds for fathering a child. All right. Now, the one thing we have to understand about this is that for men, this goal is attainable because reproductive cost is really low. How much time, when we say reproductive cost, we really mean how much time does it take for you to pass on your genes. And for men, it's just time for sex. So as soon as a man has an orgasm, it's pretty much just like, you're done. At that point, the man can decide how much involved they want to be. Do they want to have sex with the same woman again? If they father a child with that woman, you can be an absent father. Like, you don't have to be there. All right? You don't have to provide for this child. And so reproductive cost is really low. It's only the time for sex. And so what we want is, because of that, we want someone who has high reproductive success. And so what we want is people who are biologically fit. Now, to a man, what makes a woman biologically fit is we want them young. So age is a factor. Health, so that means they have to look healthy. And then also looks. And specific to the looks, what we mean by that is we want the best possible environment if a child does come. So what we are looking for, men, is going to be, according to this theory, is going to be large breasts, something called birthing hips. So I don't know if you know this, but men and women have different bone structures for their hips, and women have really wide hips, and the wider their hips, the easier it is for childbirth. All right. So what we want is wider hips. We want big breasts, because that to men, according to this theory, says reproductive success. They can feed our child because they have large breasts. They can give birth to the child without complication because they have wide hips. They're young. And we know, like, for example, for women, once you hit the age of 40, the likelihood of things like Down syndrome in your child increase dramatically. And so that's not good biological fitness. And so what we want, according to this theory, is going to be young women, healthy women, so no deformities, no physical or psychological issues, and we want the looks. And the idea here is that if you have sex with a quote-unquote attractive, pretty woman, then hopefully your child will also be attractive and pretty. All right? Now, women, on the other hand, they're different. Their goal is to keep let's say they have a child, is to keep that child alive and to groom them so that they're suitable to have a kid of their own. So therefore, their reproductive cost is high. Their reproductive cost is basically pregnancy, which is 10 months, not 9 months in humans, and all the way up to when the kid gets mature. And so according to this theory, women are pretty much the ones who are rearing the child up until they're old enough to have a child of their own. So basically when their child hits puberty. So what they want is, because their reproductive cost is so high, what they want is a partner who can provide for them and their offspring. And so they would want someone who has high status, who has a lot of money, who has a lot of resources to provide for them. All right. Now, this is caveman days. All right. In caveman days, this all makes sense, where like the guys are the hunters, and like the chief of the village is the one with all the food and all the, and all the resources. And so they can raise their child and it will live. But if you're a woman and you get impregnated by like a low level kind of peon, then you're not going to have any money, and your child that you just produced may die because they can't be fed. All right. Now, that's cave people time. In today's U.S. culture, you can see some of this ripple effect come through. For example, what we often see is, you've heard of like things like gold diggers, where what you'll see is like a woman who goes after a guy because they have money. And what you'll see is the men who have the money, they're typically older because you need time to work at your job. And what's going to happen is they're just like, wow, this young attractive thing is coming up to me and coming on to me. Like, yep, sure, let's get married. And sure enough, that's when you end up with like the 50-year-old, like the Hugh Hefner, right? Like the Playboy Mansion guy, where he's like, oh gosh, it looks like he's like 300 years old. He's probably like 80, but he has like 3 girlfriends who are all in their like early 20s. And evolutionary theory predicts that. Now, what they did for evolutionary theory, which is really kind of cool, is there was a researcher by the name of Buss. Okay. And what Buss did is he went around all over the world, all over the world. And he asked men and he asked women, what do you care about for a long-term relationship, and what do you care about for a sexual relationship? Like what variables are you looking for in a person? And overwhelmingly across all the world, what he found is that men value age and looks over anything else, and women value money, job prospects, potential, things like that. And that's what evolutionary theory says it should be. Now, you may be just like, oh, Chris, that's like tribal Africa kind of stuff. This doesn't happen today. Well, it does. Now, the thing, so with the bus study, that was done not too long ago, and it's been replicated time and time again. And it's not just tribal Africa, even though he does sample that culture, but it's also current U.S., current Western Europe. All right, so it's not just like, oh, this is like, yeah, 50 years ago. No, this happens today. Now, the issue with this, so this is a really good theory at predicting what people want in terms of sex. What it fails to do is it fails to take into account current issues that really are troubling for this theory to predict. For example, the idea of like birth control. So if this theory is all about fathering as many people as possible and having children and raising offspring, how does this? What does like birth control have to do with this? Right? Birth control basically stumps this whole theory. The idea that you can have sex for fun rather than having sex to produce offspring. That's an issue here. Also, this doesn't predict things like homosexual relationships. All right? So two women, right? This gets complicated for two women or two men for that matter. Right now, I get there's things like adoption, but how does this theory predict that as well? Because theoretically, it's not you. If you adopt a child, why would a man want to give up their resources when they don't have the sex to show that it's their child? Right? And so this theory is on its face fine, and the bus study shows that this is true, at least in terms of what women and what men prefer when they look for a partner. The only problem is that it doesn't deal anything with things like, it's just all about sex. It has nothing to do with things like marriage. It has nothing to do with things like, are you going to stay in your current relationship? Nothing to do with that at all. It's all about sex. And it's all about fathering children or having children if you're a mother. And there's a lot of issues with that. All right, there's a lot of issues. So that's going to be it for this theory. We have one more theory to talk about, and then we will be all done with this unit, or this topic.